Conversion therapy will be that when your child says, I am, that you won't be able to say you're not. We can't really move on and claim any moral virtue in this country while we leave those girls without justice. I think at that point I knew it was quite serious what was going on. If you pretend that people can make up their own rules, they damn well will. Quite frankly, I don't know if I'm okay with people in positions of authority being cowards. It's just a hatred of women. It's quite simple, I think.
Kellie-Jay, what's your reaction to the Supreme Court ruling last week in relation to the definition of what is a woman and the Equality Act, and is the tide turning for your cause?
I think yes and no. I think we'll now see an extreme reaction from the trans rights activists, which I think we are seeing. I think it's a positive step. I think it's a really unnecessary step. We all knew what it meant in the Equality Act. Otherwise, what's the point of having sex and the word woman in the Equality Act? And the category of gender reassignment, which personally I think should be obliterated from the Equality Act. In fact, I hate the Equality Act. I think it should all go. I think it's a confusing piece of legislation. But specifically on the terms woman and sex, it's unfortunate that it became necessary. But it's obviously it's a good thing that it was unanimous and they all agreed that woman is actually an adult human female.
Do you think there are elements, particularly within the Labour Party, that are going to try to change the legislation to get back to a situation in which so-called trans women can get access to female-only spaces?
I think there are definitely people who really want those men in women-only spaces, 100%. Whether or not they have the audacity to actually launch any type of campaign, I don't know. I think Keir Starmer probably is elated. He can just put it aside now. He can blame the Equality and Human Rights Commission for any guidance that's not clear. I think they're going to not deliver anything too brilliant, to be quite honest. But when it comes to silly people in Labour who just want to please their base, maybe they might do something. But I think this is a done deal, to be quite honest. I think it's done. I don't think there is a political player who's stupid enough to think that this is worth the fight.
I mean, it will be interesting to see, won't it, when Lady Faulkner's position comes up for renewal as to whether Starmer's going to reappoint her or not. I mean, Kemi Badenoch challenged him at Prime Minister's Question Time about this, and he just refused to speak. So maybe if he gets in somebody who has a completely different worldview to Lady Faulkner, who knows?
Well, maybe. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be very lovely about everybody, but I don't think she's done a particularly good job either. It was not that difficult for her. She could have been very strident in this. She's already got a shored up, safe position. It's not like she's going to lose her livelihood. So why she couldn't have clarified this a long time ago, I have no idea. But I think it's cowardice. And quite frankly, I don't know if I'm okay with people in positions of authority being cowards.
She, I mean, has suggested that there should be third spaces to accommodate trans, in inverted commas, women. Do you think there should be any accommodation?
No, I don't. And she's not the only one that talks from a human rights point of view about accommodating these men. I actually think we should do less to accommodate these men. I think we should do nothing to accommodate them. And in fact, I think we should do things to really stand in their way. This is not a few people who want freedom to live their lives. These are people who want to be entitled to go into women-only spaces where we know, A, they get very happy about the whole situation, and B, we know part of that enjoyment for them is the discomfort of women. So I'd like to see, I personally would like to see some discrimination coming back where we can actually really say to someone, do you know what, that's not fit and proper in society. You can't come to work dressed as a woman. You're not a woman. And we don't like the motivation of it. But even if we did, even if we pretended it wasn't a fetish, it's not appropriate for work.
I mean, they've done a brilliant job, haven't they, the trans ideologues, of arguing that a refusal to accommodate their intrusive demands is akin to visiting violence against them, wanting them to be erased, and hence then the whole kind of Nazi analogy some of them make.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of galling because trans has never been something that's been illegal in this country. I mean, there's a long history of men dressing up in women's clothing, sort of 1930s lesbians dressing up as men, even in the dark, bad old days when homosexuality was illegal. Nobody has ever sort of sought to stop people going around saying that they're a woman or dressing up however they want to.
Yeah, although I think we did have a contract that they really did it in private. I mean, I think that's what's happened over the last couple of decades. There's been more and more people out in the street parading their fetish. Like, look, I don't care what people do in the comfort of their own home. I don't think any of us do. I don't want to know either, but I don't really care. It's not any of my business. But it becomes my business when I'm expected to participate in somebody's fetish, which is to be a bystander or to be uncomfortable at them doing this particular fetish in public.
Where do you think this sort of fetish comes from? I mean, it's a very unusual one. I suppose all fetishes appear unusual to people who don't share them, but this desire to impose it publicly is sort of strange for those of us who don't do that.
Well, yeah, but there are humiliation fetish. There is humiliation fetishes, and so it's sort of part of that. But they often go hand in hand. So some men might not want the shame of it, but some really do enjoy the shame that comes with it. And who is it? The chap who does pottery, who's a cross-dresser.
Grayson Perry.
Grayson Perry. He will talk about fetishes kind of embedding with some sort of callback to childhood. So that's when the inception of the fetish. How much I believe in that, I don't know, but that's what he will talk about. But you know, the kids are saturated with pornography, so I think fetishes are probably growing. Narcissism and fetish. What a joy.
So you're against, going back to what you were saying just a bit earlier, you're against, it seems to me, the whole concept of protected characteristics, or have I misinterpreted you?
Well, I am. I'd like to see maybe a specific rights act for disability rights and maybe a men's rights act and a women's rights act so that we can really tackle some of the things that happen to both sexes that don't really cross over. So you might want to look at male suicide. You might want to look at like what's happened to men since we've stopped manufacturing in this country, and then for women you might want to look at certain health aspects and maternity, and then disability rights. I think is really where we should have diversity and inclusion. That's where it should start and finish. But the rest of it, no, I don't. You know, we've seen such bizarre cases over the years of, say, a girl wearing a hijab, not getting a job somewhere where there is a dress code that didn't include a hijab. And I think that those sorts of places, I don't think it's proper to insist that people accept, you know, just get a different job.
Yeah. I mean, if we do, or the powers that be go down the road now of accommodating the trans movement with the idea of third spaces. I mean, what would be to stop, say, a group of people who identify as animals at some point in the future, if that was to become a thing, demanding that they too then must be accommodated with special loos and I don't know, goodness knows what else. I mean, there is a group called the furries, I think.
There are, yeah. It's very, very dangerous group of people where there's a lot of predatory males that operate in that space. So quite a dangerous thing if people's teenage children, if you think it's just some fun, it's really not. I don't know whether we'll go down the route of animals, and I don't think we'll go down the route of third spaces. And the reason we won't do that is because the men who are predominantly controlling the movement of what they might call trans, they don't want a third space. They want to be in women's spaces. So that's not really going to work.
Yeah. How do you explain the sort of vehemence, the aggression of some within the transgender ideology movement? I mean, why they, despite all these slogans saying be kind and don't challenge our interpretation of who we are, there's a really nasty quality to some of the demonstrations we've seen since the ruling, with posters about hanging TERFs and, so on and so forth. What explains it?
Oh, it's so dull, but it's just a hatred of women. It's quite simple, I think. You ask any woman when she's finally had enough of her domineering, awful husband and asking to leave, he becomes violent. And with like I'm talking about domestic abuse. I'm not saying that all men at all. I'm not going anywhere near that. It's rare, thank goodness. It's a small number of men, but they're significant. And in this movement, there seems to be quite a substantial number of them, and also the women that are part of this movement. I mean, some of them are taking testosterone. Maybe that explains it. But I often say this thing to the young women that come, you hate us, but you will become us. There will come a time when you have like wrinkly faces and you don't quite trade on your youth and beauty as easily. Come and be a 50-year-old woman and then find out what actually being hated is all about.
I mean, women now seem to occupy a strange position with regards to the sort of identity politics, intersectional left, because on the one hand, they say women are the victims of the patriarchy. They are an oppressed class. But then now it seems to me there's a sort of transition taking place whereby they're saying that what they would call heteronormative women who deny the trans lot the right to intrude on their spaces, they are now part of a new oppressor class of, bourgeois normies.
Yes. Well, that kind of serves women right for thinking that we can have equality, because then men have found a way to kind of just get back. I don't necessarily think as a woman, I'm not a feminist, and B, I don't find the kind of concept of patriarchy particularly helpful. I just like to talk about things that are sexist that we all appreciate. And where we are right now, especially in the left, if you get on a bus, if you yourself get on a bus and you manspread, you open your legs too wide next to a woman, that would be like a capital offence. However, if you go in her changing room and do robe and say that you're a woman, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. So none of it makes sense because it's all not true. So there's no logic when you're just making up stuff as you go along.
So is that why, do you think, they are so keen to suppress any debate or challenge? I mean, I've tried to have conversations with people I know or am related to about this, and they go completely mad. They really don't want to discuss it. The only person I'd ever been able to discuss it with in a sort of relatively normal way was Peter Tatchell, and I organised a debate between Helen Joyce and myself against him and somebody called Frida Wallace. But he's one of the very few people who seems prepared to discuss it.
Yeah, and I don't think he gets the issue from either side. I could argue his side better than he can. I don't think he gets it. I think he sort of talks in terms that he seems to have picked up, but I don't think he truly understands.
At least he's civilized and
Yes.
accepts that, there are going to be people who have a different perspective. I accept the right, obviously, of people to disagree with me on this and anything else. But for some reason, when you try to discuss it with most people who adhere to it to some degree, they get very tetchy, or they say, I'm not prepared to continue discussing this. And,
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is because it doesn't stand up to scrutiny whatsoever, and there's no defense for most of the things that we have an issue with. There's no good defense for it. And the second one is there's kind of been this instruction of no debate. Any sort of debate, they basically qualify as being dehumanizing and trying to erase them. And that's because they've stolen so much from other genuine civil rights movements. So it just, you can't argue something that isn't real, and you know that you can't argue it. I mean, I put up a billboard in 2018 of the dictionary definition of the word woman, thinking that was a real gotcha. When they took it down, I was like, everybody will see. It's such a genius move. Everyone will see that these people are just terrible and there's no argument, and they're trying to erase the word woman. And obviously I was quite right. And it didn't have that impact whatsoever. In fact, it was largely ignored because nobody wanted to have that conversation.
But it was a genius move in the sense that you got a huge amount of publicity from the fact it was taken down. I mean, that's why I think I first came across you. I saw you in various sort of television interviews. So actually, it was maybe inadvertently a genius.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they'd take.
strategy.
Well, I didn't know. I knew the TRAs would make a fuss, and I thought that would be sort of quite revealing for everybody. But when the company took it down, I remember feeling like that had a real chilling effect. And I thought that was quite worrying. And what's worrying about that is cold, hard cash has always spoken for itself. And if it makes money, it makes money. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And this was a decision by a company, a commercial enterprise, that said, this is better for our brand to remove this than keep it up. And I think at that point I knew it was quite serious what was going on.
Yeah, what was also really serious, talking of official definitions of women, was that the Thames Valley Constabulary announced that if anybody distributed the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of a woman in the form of leaflets and posters around within their policing area, they would treat that as a hate crime, and you would be charged under the Public Order Act. I mean, that is truly chilling and insane when the cops pile on top of corporate entities, as you would say.
Well, I'd already been interviewed by the police in early 2018. In February of 2018, I was interviewed under caution for 6 tweets.
Wow, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so in 2017 October, I got some text messages from the police. We want to talk to you about malicious communications. And I thought it was trans rights activists, and they got hold of my number. I just didn't know that our police would text people to say we'd like a chat. So after a while, I thought, right, I'm going to call them back. And it was Susie Green had reported me for hate speech, but they also wanted to.
Sorry, who is Susie?
Susie Green is the CEO, or was the CEO, of the charity Mermaids. And Mermaids, the business of Mermaids is to make Susie Green feel less bad about taking her son to Thailand and castrating him when he was 16. In fact, that was one of my tweets, that she'd castrated her son. And anyway, and then there was another one where I called a man Mr. And there was
Oh, that's terrible.
I know, it was heinous.
I hope you feel shame about that.
Well, I wonder if this time I'd be joining Lucy Connolly for a nice stretch. So there were 6 tweets. I can't remember the other ones, but they were all along that kind of, men are men, and it's wrong to castrate kids. I don't know. So for his 16th birthday, this boy had been castrated and had sex reassignment surgery. My son, around the same age, had a PlayStation. So, very different types of parenting, myself and Susie Green. And so I got in touch with the police, and he was all friendly and lovely, and he was from West Yorkshire. And then I got Bill Bache, who was famous for the Angela Canning's Shaken Baby. He was the lawyer for that. He was amazing, lovely, so posh. And he represented me, and we went along to the police station, and the police came down from West Yorkshire and spent the night in a hotel in Wiltshire to interview me under caution. And they wanted to charge me with public order, nuisance, malicious communications, conspiracy, hate speech, and so on. And in the interview, the hate crime officer, he said, castration, sex reassignment surgery doesn't include castration. And I just thought, I don't know what he thought he meant, what he thought for a minute happened with someone's testicles when they have sex reassignment
Did you
surgery.
point this out to him? Did you give him a basic biology lesson?
No, because I'm an expert. I've watched the bill, and so all the way through, I just said no comment.
Oh, like a
Just
serial killer.
like a proper criminal, yeah. Just no comment all the way through, and we had a prepared statement which we gave at the end. But they did take it, send it to CPS twice because it came back and they said no, and so they sent it again.
That is incredible. So we now have the phenomenon of non-crime hate incident databases, so that the cops can come after you even if they don't suspect that you've actually committed a crime. So they've given themselves, because it's never been passed by Parliament, this,
No.
they've given themselves the power to politically intervene, a bit as if they were a sort of diluted version of the Iranian morality police.
Yes.
So they can come after people.
Yeah.
Well, like yourself, but others, many others, on the basis, I mean, they're clearly wasting police time themselves, because these aren't crimes.
Well, they've come after me 3 times. So I've been interviewed under caution 3 times. I've had them round to my house once for being, and I quote, untoward about paedophiles. And I just said to the officer, I was like, I said, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you can be untoward about anyone, it is paedophiles. Surely we can be untoward about paedophiles.
What do you mean by untoward?
Well, what he really meant, I think he misspoke. What he really meant is that I had accused somebody of being a paedophile. Basically, I've said that if you're a man, I think, and you know that little girls are in a space, and you go in that space, I think you're a predatory paedophile. That's what I said. And I think the police, he just got all mixed up. I can't imagine he really wanted to do that when he joined the police, is visit a woman's house and tell them off for something they've said. You know, some trans activist has reported, and then they come around my house and tell me off about it.
Well, it might beat, I guess, actually having to go after criminals in real time, like in the sort of episode of The Sweeney. They're pounding the tweets all day long, having a nice cup of tea, staying in hotels overnight when they come to harass you. So maybe actually he thought that wasn't the best.
Well, that's got to be further up the food chain, hasn't it? That's got to be a political kind of. I just think if you join the police, well, aside from some of the officers, I think there was a woman who called herself non-binary or called herself a man, and I think there was either someone with autism or Down syndrome who had called her a woman, or said, "What are you?" And that person had been charged or whatever. But aside from that, I think most people join the police because they genuinely want to solve crime. I don't think they want to police people's speech. I mean, I may be wrong, but I have hope that that's why people join the police.
At the last general election, you led your party, the Party of Women. Didn't one of your candidates have trouble with the police in Sheffield, which was, again, an example of sort of selective political intervention?
Yeah, that was quite weird. And I think that's really dodgy to mess around with somebody during an election, because that's sort of election interference. But we didn't pursue it too much. He sort of went with the Free Speech Union, I think. And but the police had intervened, told her it was a hate leaflet. I think he put something on Facebook. She wasn't the only one. We had quite a bit of that from various people during their campaign.
I mean, the thing that made it very significant for me when I read about it was that this was her actual election address, which the Royal Mail have to distribute. Every candidate has at least that in terms of how they can communicate with voters. And I think they intervened to stop her leaflet being distributed Now, that's very serious stuff in a democracy.
Yes. Well, also, you can't send it. So Royal Mail have to approve it because they obviously can't be party to malicious communications. So they've already sort of decided that it's absolutely fine. But yeah, the police getting involved in sort of people's political campaigning is something we should all be frightened of, whatever the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, take it as read that the police cannot be the arbiters of what goes out and doesn't go out. I want to ask you about what are the ideas behind the trans ideology movement? I mean, it really is a mystery to many of us who've only recently become interested in this sphere of politics and cultural life. What's driving it? Because you've even got quite mainstream people who seem sane, like Keir Starmer and Ed Davey and many, many others, Theresa May. Why have they given it support? Why have they become fellow travellers?
Well, I think we're in a funny time where there's sort of social currency. So I think that helps. I think that people are really online far too much. I think everything becomes a declaration. So you have to kind of think about all the time about the million ways that somebody is going to interpret what you say. I personally don't try not to buy into that, and I sort of think, well, fine, I'll just make a mistake. I'll just say it and make a mistake, and I'll live by that mistake, and that's fine. But politicians don't seem to have the courage or conviction or charisma to really be able to carry any of those things off. So I think that's why. I think there's an awful lot of money to be made. You can make a medical patient for life if you block their puberty. So too many people can buy status, make money, exert power. And then you've got kind of otherworldly stuff like hooking up your whole personality and person to to some sort of computer mainframe, which is it's too much to bite sometimes. I think for some people, I think it's just too much to consider because it's bizarre. But we're now in a time where 20 years ago, some sort of tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists were talking about we're going to block the sun. Everyone's like, that's ridiculous. Nobody's ever going to block the sun. And then you've got Ed Miliband saying, no, we're gonna block the sun. So I think about the most wild explanation you've got for trans activism and the whole trans movement. Like the most wild, crazy thing that can link in with surrogacy, with wombs outside the body, with gay men going along and having the right to force the NHS to hire a surrogate so they can have a baby, and all these things that are taking us far from humanity. And I don't think you can go too wrong, no matter where your brain ends up as to what you think is driving this. You're probably right.
One of the extreme manifestations of the ideology is the whole concept of queering. And I don't know if you have a particular view about that. I mean, you mentioned earlier, you touched on sort of grooming.
Yes.
And it seems to me that the really extreme end of it, I mean, the Keir Starmers are giving it some sort of respectable cover. And as you say, it's not a priority for them, but they just go along with it. But that the real core of the movement are people who have some sort of revolutionary agenda in terms of wanting to fundamentally transform our society, and to do that they're getting at kids. Or does that sound too conspiracy theory?
No, that's 100% true. So I went into a school with a mother. So if you let me go back a bit. So we have a man called Andrew Moffat who runs an organization called No Outsiders, which sounds so lovely, doesn't it? Just bring everyone in and be included. And he's a gay man, and I think he might have had some homophobic bullying at school, and I think that might be kind of his, I'm going to solve this for everybody. And we're also in an age at the moment where you can't say no to a child. Like at school, they don't use the word no. They don't use the word sit down, be quiet. They don't use any of those words. It's things like, you're on a number 5. Now you're on a number 4. If you get to a number 3, and they do all these things, anything not to say, stop it, sit down, stop it. And schools have been captured since about 2011, 2012, and the first I knew of it in 2015, they were not using the word boys and girls in school anymore. And that's in my middle of nowhere, small town in Wiltshire. They were doing it there, where nobody is really woke. We're proper Brexit. Everyone voted to leave. Most people are on sort of average salary or lower where I live. And it was happening in schools. Anyway, so you've got this queering of the classroom. That's what Stephen Moffat wants to, Andrew Moffat. That's what Andrew Moffat wants to do. What that means is that everybody in that classroom, whether they're 2 or 55, they have a sexual identity, sexual orientation and gender identity, which comes back to something called SOGI, which is a movement to eradicate sex-based rights and replace it with sexual orientation and gender identity. And so Andrew Moffat has designed this whole program of these books going into school, which if you step back a little bit, it's lovely. There's a little boy who's disabled, there's someone else who's autistic, but really what's driving this whole thing is actually talking about being gay to sort of 4 and 5-year-olds, which we didn't used to talk about because we didn't used to talk about any of that. You might have a romance story because most people have a mum and dad, and I think that's where that comes from. And people use the word heteronormative because it actually is quite normal. Most people are heterosexual. And normal doesn't have to mean kind of there is normal and there's abnormal, grotesque, vile. It just means normal, most common. But he's just done this syllabus thing, and you'll go in and know outside of school, and it's pride and trans stuff everywhere in everything that they do. The first thing you see when you arrive in reception is sort of a big pride thing. Oh, we're a no outside of school, pride in our school. But the books are very subtle. So they might have, there's a book called My Shadow is Pink, and it's a little boy, and so his dad's shadow is blue, and all the men in his family, their shadows are blue, and his shadow is pink because he wants to wear a dress. And I know somebody could argue that that's all about, oh, little boys can do different things. Well, yeah, he can still do that with a shadow that's blue. He can still do all that. He can still want to do ballet and play with dolls, but he can still have a blue shadow. And the pink thing, all the way through, it just is lovely, but so subtle. And then the dad said, oh, and I realised the pink shadow is not just your shadow. The shadow is you. Like, as in his inner self is pink, which is really regressive and stereotypical. And there's many of these books. So the queering of the classroom is accessing children. Then you can use those children as a human shield, because if a child is trans, then that's not a fetish. And then you can, the men that are autogynephiles, which is the sexual attraction to themselves as women, and they look less perverse, because actually there's a little boy who's 7 who's also thinks he's a girl.
And this presumably is also driving a wedge in some cases between parents and their children, though that might be the agenda. I mean, it has overtones for me of the sort of Hitler Jugend or, later equivalents in East Germany or something. So, or Mao, indeed. I mean, it's good identities and bad identities, the red identities, the black identities. Somebody called James Lindsay, who I'm a big fan of, talks about this in relation to this type of stuff in terms of what happened during the Cultural Revolution. So it's very, very sinister, because if you have parents who don't want to go along with this, but their children, when they're away from the home, are being fed this kind of stuff.
Yes.
What's going to happen?
Well, you have people called egg hatchers in sort of Discord chats and different chats where children congregate and speak and socialize. And in those chats, what they'll do is they'll focus on a vulnerable teenager, adolescent, and then they will focus on them and then bring them in. And they talk about these men talk about this freely, as if it's like it's a great thing to do, and they will alienate those children from their families. But I think there's lots of that in society. That in the last election cycle, there was a real push to get babies into daycare as soon as possible. It was like hey, vote for us and you can leave your child at 9 months for 5 days a week, or vote for us and you can have wraparound care. You can go to breakfast club and after school clubs. That means you can go and work to a job that you probably damn well hate, and you're on minimum wage, to drop your kids off with some people who also hate their jobs for minimum wage in a breakfast club. And now that the Labour government have done that for free, I've got friends who are celebrating it. And like, no, this is their way of saying you don't have any excuse, actually, not to have a full-time job. So sorry, Janet, you might want to see your children at 3:15 every day, but we're not going to top up your universal credit. We're going to say that if you're not doing a full-time job when you've got all this access to childcare, so all these places, and I think it started with Gillick. I think Gillick is one of the first bits of law or legislation that really said.
Could you remind us what Gillick sort of
Yeah,
was?
so that meant that girls seeking contraception could do it without their parents' consent at 16 or under. And before that, you probably had to have your parents' consent. And lots of friends totally disagree. Again, feminists in particular disagree with me on this. And they say, well, it gives a girl autonomy. And I was like, no, it doesn't. She doesn't make that decision. The doctor makes that decision. The state makes that decision. And I don't think anyone loves my children more than me. Certainly don't think the state does. And even accounting for bad parents, even a bad parent is a better parent to a child than the state in most cases. And so I think that first bit sort of said to parents, actually, we have more of a right to your child and what's best for your child than you do. And I think you'll find that that's how a lot of these activist teachers feel, that they know better, that when they say to little Johnny, oh, you can wear a dress. Yes. And oh, what do you want to be called? And we're going to change your pronouns. And or teachers going into school with their fetish or with their pretend identities, and everyone seems to think that should be celebrated. You know, I fundamentally don't think there is a place for people with a fetish to be teaching children at all, or even a fake identity. I just don't think they should be teaching kids.
The incredible thing about drag queen story time, in relation to what you've just said, you just sort of triggered a thought, is that these typically are, say, middle-aged men claiming to be a woman in this very sexually provocative stuff.
Yes.
Reading to, little Johnny and little Jane and whoever. If those same men went into the school claiming to be men and in male fetish attire, people would say, get away from the kids. This is a safeguarding issue. But somehow, because they just say the word woman and claim they're a drag queen, this casts a spell over, headmasters, local education authority chiefs, politicians. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? Bizarre.
I wonder if it's because teaching is quite a feminized profession. And I think there's a lot of, I hate to say this, there's a lot of middle-aged idiot white women who think that the way to show tolerance and acceptance is by celebrating men in dresses. It's and it's us.
So it's more about them than the kids, really.
It's 100% more about them. It's saying, look, I'm such a great person because I'm going to invite a drag queen in, and aren't we all great, everyone? We should just feel so good about ourselves. I feel that that's really what's going on in all of this. That's why women are more likely to subject their children to pretend identities. Men are more likely to bring a fetish into their home. So a man is more likely to claim to be a woman and get his children to participate. And men often decide to wear women's clothes when their daughters go through puberty. It's really, really quite disgusting. Or when their wives are pregnant, or when they first get married. So those will be that. But it's the women that are wearing their trans child as like some sort of affirmation and achievement.
A fashion accessory.
It's so much so, yes. Instagram, it's like Instagram likes. They'll do a whole thing about, I'm so wonderful, look at my beautiful daughter. And you think, well, that little boy might pass as a little girl, but wait till he's like 35, and all the boyness has disappeared. that he will just be a man. Like, there's no getting away from it. Men get better looking with age because they just get more and more manly throughout their lives. Like, women, unfortunately, we sort of go off piste and we just sadly just decline. Whereas I think men can continue to get more attractive because they just get more.
Well, some of
masculine.
us anyway, but obviously can't speak for everybody. The whole question of the state taking over parenting and imposing its values as if we were almost in a sort of theology, in sort of medieval Europe. One danger I see, and I'd be interested to get your view on this, is the proposed law this government is going to pass at some point. It's a manifesto commitment to ban what they call LGBT plus conversion therapy, which presumably means this is going to limit what parents, as well as psychotherapists, are allowed to say to children on this matter, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I would say don't take your child to a psychotherapist, to be quite honest. I think they've been pretty bad. I have some very good friends who are amazing and were the whistleblowers at the Tavistock and so on, and they're wonderful. But I think more often than not, psychotherapy for children is because parents haven't spent enough time with their kids and don't want to be blamed for kind of harsh discipline. Like, not in all cases. I'm sure there is a case for it, but we farm out too much. America does that more than us, and they're in a terrible state, I think, because of it. But yeah, that the conversion therapy will be that when your child says "I am," that you won't be able to say "you're not." But how far that will go, I don't know. I think it's many things. I think the government is doing it doesn't really make that much difference. We just have to change the culture. It's not like Trump. Like, we don't have anyone that can deliver a message and anyone listens and thinks, wow, that's so powerful. I think I pretty much mean anyone. We just lack charisma and, maybe Kinnock, Thatcher, Widdicombe. Maybe ththese were the last really interesting politicians.
Whittaker's charismatic, I must admit.
She's you know what she believes.
Oh yeah,
right?
sure.
You know what she believes, and I think she is. I think she's like quietly sort of cross, and I think she's identifiably something and someone. Whereas I think there's so many that are they all just blend into one person with one policy. And so, Tony Benn,
Oh yeah,
people that you knew. Yes.
Yeah, great man, I think. Moving towards a conclusion, I'd be interested to know how you became interested in this issue and what were your sort of broader politics before you honed in on this, and why did you?
Well, I was a Labour voter since I was 18, and even voted for Jeremy Corbyn to lead the party. And I was obviously morally virtuous and lovely.
Well, we take that as read.
Yeah. And 2015, Cameron was elected. I don't think I had any idea that the Conservative government were going to be elected. I sort of thought with the student loan stuff and the fees, I just assumed we were going to go Labour. And so I joined this massive movement called Awesome Lefty Women. I think it started with about 400 people when I joined. There was about 20,000. And it was very women. And it was like women talking about politics with no strategy whatsoever, just whining. And then men joined. And these were, to be polite, truckers in dresses. These were older men who didn't look like women at all and did soft focus, kind of 1980s soft focus camera shoots, portraits. And I just said one day, are you sure you identify as a woman? And the whole place went nuts and called me transphobic and all things that I'd never really heard before. And And then I was like, oh, we're not allowed to talk about this. So I want to talk about it. And I was a stay-at-home mother. I've got 4 children. I was very happy. I had a great job. And then once I had my kids, I just didn't want to go back. And I loved every second of it. Didn't think I would love that either, but I did. Really liked raising my own children. Fancy that. But yeah, this whole place was weird, and I was like, you can't talk about it. So I started posing the question, does my daughter have the right to go in a female-only space and not see an adult penis? And the answer was categorically, from all the Labour groups I was in, no, she doesn't. She's a pervert. You're raising a pervert. Why is she staring at genitals? And so I just started from there. And I'm a little bit like, I'm not having that. I just feel a bit of a grown-up and probably a bit of a matriarch, and it's sort of absolutely not. This is ridiculous. Put all your toys away. Put your toys away now. We're not playing this ridiculous game, and I'm going to sort it out. And so I just started trying to sort it out.
Do you think there's going to be a realignment of politics? Because it seems to me, to use a sort of term out of one of those, singing television series like The Voice or something, that you've been on a journey. Are you still broadly somebody of the left, or do you see now the opportunity for a new type of politics, maybe divided by culture rather than economics? Where's your party going, for example, in all of this?
Well, I just want to be a disruptor. I think that's what my political party is about. It's about disrupting, and it's about creating conversations and making space for conversations for women. And we started as a single issue, and now I really want to talk about the conundrum of motherhood in this country, and how we don't really censor children, and how the word mother obviously has tried to be eradicated anyway. But also the very difficult position that most women are in, that they don't want to go back to work and leave their small non-verbal children with carers, but they can't afford not to, and it's a ridiculous place for us to be in. So I'd like to talk about that. I want to talk about criminalising anybody that turned a blind eye to what happened with all of those girls being raped up and down the country. I think that's a really important thing, that we can't really move on and claim any moral virtue in this country while we leave those girls without justice. I also want to talk about migration, and illegal migrants in hotels, and the threat that imposes on women. So yeah, I think it's right, and we're right and wrong at the moment. I don't know if the left was ever what I thought it was. And I think the place where we are and where the left is was always sort of going to happen. I remember talking to Brett Weinstein, and he was talking about Evergreen University, and he was talking about how great it was, and all this, and how they were really accepting, and you could kind of go anywhere with your degree. And I was just listening, and I just thought, well, it was always going to go here then. It was always going to end up in this sort of chaos where there was, if you pretend that people can make up their own rules, they damn well will. And a vacuum is created where somebody else will come along and say, well, these are the rules. Your made up rules, these are really the rules. And so I think that's where the left is. The left has been allowed to reach its logical conclusion, which is this sort of place, which is a terrible place. And I don't know if the right is I don't know if the right is even represented in this country. And I'd probably say that I'm further down that path than I ever was before. I remember listening to, he wasn't leader of he was never Prime Minister, Ian Duncan Smith. And he said that he was really upset when he met a family and they'd never worked. And I remember thinking, as a lefty, how ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. And his reason was because these people had never felt what it was like to kind of do something that was of any value and feel the value in that. And I think I'm more there than I've ever been. So I probably am. I didn't want to have to go right, but I think I probably have.
But it seems to me there's a possibility of a an overlap between elements of the traditional social democratic left, who would certainly have been into, the ethic of working and, respecting women's spaces and a belief in national sovereignty and so on. So it seems to me there's a possibility now for an alliance with elements on the centre right.
Yes.
And that there might become some sort of powerful new movement which in the future will take on the new left, who, as you've said, I think have gone down a completely insane sort of postmodernist route that is really dangerous.
Yeah, I think we all want people to have jobs and do jobs that they like and feel at the end of it they've been paid well and that there's some loyalty. I don't know many people that feel any loyalty to their job or their company, and vice versa. How have we got to this place that's so bad? And people don't have to achieve anything anymore. They just have to declare something to receive recognition. Oh, it's so brave. Why is it brave? Well, because I'm pansexual. Oh, yippee. You don't have to climb a mountain or do anything remotely challenging to be praised. So I'd like to see a return to that. I think we'd all like to see a return to some sort of purpose. And maybe that might even be the purpose of kind of being building this nation and feeling like we have a nation that we care about enough and cares about us enough to actually want to make it a place that we all want to live.
Well, that requires, I think, rejecting, challenging the politics of identity, which is preventing us from interacting as individual human beings who have a broadly common culture and very broad set of values. So
Yes.
that might be one of the fault lines that will lead to a new type of politics. My last question, which I ask everybody who I talk to, is if you had a Trump-like executive order superpower, what is it you would create with that power or get rid of? Or
Well, if we take it as read, that I would obviously do his executive order about adult human female and everything I would just import that entire executive order. But what I'd like to do aside from that would be to leave the European Court of Human Rights. I would like to leave that. I'd like to leave everything that means that we don't have national sovereignty. That's what I would do instantly.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.